My name's Elizabeth Marshall. I did modeling and various entrepreneurial efforts for most of my 20s and 30s. I left college early because I was not inspired at all and didn't want to work for anybody else and just kind of wanted to take a different path. But a lot of the modeling stuff like really kind of took off in my 30s, which is sort of unusual. Like it's almost, most people have success with that around like 1925, like 19 to 25 years old, just because, for obvious reasons. But it was always kind of a lifelong dream, and that's just kind of when it ended up coming to fruition. And I've done, I think, nine FHM covers at this point, one Maxim, two Muscle and Fitness Hers, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Glamour Bulgaria, and it's been really fun. Like I love to do, the creative direction and the styling and all that for shoots, and it was really fun. But it's sort of like an NFL career. You've got a window where you're active, and then you've got to make plans for after it's over. So coaching was always what I wanted to do. And I'm 40 now, and I can help anybody, but I really like to help men and women over 30, especially over 35, because of my own journey and where I currently am. I feel like I know a lot about, hormone replacement, peptides, various things that I think this generation is on the forefront of understanding about, aging well and feeling good as you get older and all of that. So that's who I primarily serve. And I love it. I love it. I love helping people realize that, you don't need to be 19 to get in shape, and you also, you don't have to kill yourself, and you don't have to starve yourself, and you don't realize how much better you can look and feel. Bad information, and I would even say at this point, malicious information. I'm very much one of these people that's believed for a long time, and it's becoming much more provable than ever before, that, things are put in our food that are not healthy. They know they're not healthy. Like ultra processed food is hurting us terribly. It's hurting kids really bad. But yeah, like it also, people, like you said, have misconceptions about, especially if they live a really sedentary lifestyle, or they're just like the biggest roadblock to getting in shape is ignorance. And ignorance doesn't mean stupidity. It just means you don't know what you're doing. And I've met plenty of very, very, very smart people who are very ignorant when it comes to fitness because nobody ever taught them. Nobody ever teaches people this stuff. Like I know people with master's degrees who don't have any idea how to eat because they've been told these wrong things about food, like, oh, it's granola, but they don't look at a label and they don't see all this fat and sugar and like processed stuff. Like they just don't know, and they pick it up quick once you start to teach them. But I've coached several people who are almost like a little angry at like how much they feel like they've been neglected in this department, or like how much they feel like they've been lied to even. Like our food pyramid's upside down. Carbs are important, but they shouldn't be down here. They should be maybe like maybe not at the very top, but towards the top, and protein should be down here. And I personally think that was an intentional deception. The government's, I'm 40, and they've been pushing that food pyramid since I was a kid. It's just not true.
It's becoming less of a conspiracy theory and more of like, you're either on board and trying to get better, or you're just kind of like falling into the trap, if you will.
Agreed. And yeah, there's, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but you're right. Like it's much less of, like I said before, it's much more provable than it's ever been before. And it's just evidence. It's just basic, like read a label. Can you pronounce half that stuff? Because I can't. Like, what is that? So there's nothing wrong with asking questions about what you're eating. That doesn't make you paranoid. It doesn't, like the more that we can get back to, whole non-processed, like nutrient dense foods, like the 80-20 principle, like eating that overwhelmingly and then kind of making room for everything else. That'll change society a lot. Like I believe diabetes is the number one health problem in this country. Like it costs our healthcare system more than anything else by a mile. Most of that's obesity related. Some of it's age related, and some people are born like with type 1 or whatever, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, type 2 fat person diabetes. Like that's caused by food. And it's sometimes, it's caused by, overeating and, I guess a lack of moral character. But I really have noticed my whole life that a lot of the times it's not. Like I know people from Europe. I've talked to people from Europe in the past, at least, who say, I pretty much eat the same thing here as I do at home. Why am I fat here? And that's a valid question. It's what is in our food. There's nitrates, there's all sorts of stuff. So I'm really glad, I've been concerned about this stuff for a long time, but I'm really glad to see so many people finally starting to talk about it. I feel like it's all over my social media feeds now. It feels like it happened overnight, which is wonderful because that's the first step is awareness. And it doesn't mean that, everything people say is true, but it does mean there's a lot of evidence that you really need to start looking into some of these food dyes and like, you know, what they say about corn, high fructose corn syrup, that stuff's true. Like guar gum, the way that gums up your inside, it's just not good. And some of them are just used to make food, prettier and more palatable and stuff like that. But even in those circumstances, like it's fake stuff. You want to be eating as close to natural state whole foods as you possibly can, like things your ancestors had access to.
Are you a personal trainer, online fitness coach, or gym owner on the verge of burnout? Are you wanting to grow your fitness business but can't add more hours to your hectic schedule? Introducing Trainer Revenue Multiplier, the premier wealth creation system for fitness professionals that helps you earn more and work less. Visit www.trainerrevenuemultiplier.com today to schedule your free business accelerator session. If you're serious about taking your business to the next level, schedule your call today. Yeah, I think, we turn this word superfood into like this thing that is very marketable, but like you said, like if we just go back to like eating whole foods, I think every whole food, I think every fruit, vegetable, and, good quality meat that is, coming from good sources is a superfood in and of itself. Like they all have their own kind of individual powers, if you will, if you want to look at it like that. They all have their own individual merit and things that that they can do for us. But it's a matter of, like you said, just figuring out how to get people back to this idea that what we put in our body is so much more important. Like calories, of course, are important. Like we can't overeat even good food, right? Like you're eventually overeating anything is going to lead to gaining weight. But like it's a lot harder to overeat whole foods, but B, it's just your quality of food is so important. Like we can't forget that. Like we have turned into this society that is so like obsessed with low calorie, low sugar, low fat, low carb, with how can we lose weight as fast as possible. It's just don't eat anything. And it's just really interesting how we flipped the script of like almost going to the extremes and like not, in some senses, like not caring, to now there that we have some of these things out. It's like people are flipping the script of, okay, well, I used to just overeat and eat everything and anything, but now I'm just not going to eat anything. I'm going to figure out a way to not eat anything. And like, how do we figure out a balance there of, no, we
Well,
don't overeat, but we also don't need to eat nothing either.
yeah, a lot of that's just caused by ignorance, and I say that because I used to be in that spot, and it's because I didn't know better. Like all I really knew, like when I first started working out, I think I was maybe in my early midish 20s, and it was really just because I looked in the mirror one day and I was like, I feel like I'm kind of overweight. Like just feel like I could look better than this, And I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew, maybe if I eat more salads and go for walks and stuff, like a whole lot more, like that'll work. And it did initially, because that's the great thing about starting out is it all falls off so quick. But just from there, I just had to start learning about food and about working out and how it all works. But yeah, like I used to really, like most people did, try to restrict my calories because I didn't know how else to lose weight. Like I'm like, I have to eat less, right? Or I have to eat, people get obsessive about like eating one or two things or, like these things that people do. It's really, in my opinion, what is causing you to have to restrict your intake and starve yourself like that is because your system's just all messed up with this stuff you're really not supposed to be eating. If you get on a schedule where you're eating, I'm going to say like 4 times, I eat 4 times a day. That's the thing. I eat 4 times a day, every single day, without question, no matter what. And I'm never hungry. And that never used to be the case. And I look better by a mile than I ever have. Probably ever at this point, I look better than I ever have. But it really just revolves around rotating all of your meals around protein, 30 to 50 grams at every single meal. That's kind of the key. Because that's what keeps you full and that's what keeps you satiated. And that's what keeps your blood sugar from crashing and you getting, these huge cravings where you go and stuff your face. And it just becomes this vicious cycle. But once you get on a habit of eating protein focused meals with, healthy carbs and veggies and all that kind of stuff, to complement it, depending on what you're eating and all of that. But once you start doing that for a little while, like your body just kind of balances out. Like you start losing weight, you start feeling better, you have more energy, everything's more leveled out. Like you don't feel the need to starve yourself. It just, everything changes. It really is the quality of things I think that we're eating in this country. I
Mm.
really do. it really all comes back to that and again ignorance and not stupidity, but just no one. I don't know if school's changed. I don't imagine it has, but when I was growing up, they never taught us anything about this. Like we had PE and everything, but you'd run laps around the track and no one taught you about muscles or hypertrophy or nutrition or how any of this stuff actually works. It's like valuable. I mean, that's like essential life skill stuff, if you ask me.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's tricky too, right? Because like you said, we have these government issued, if you will, recommendations, the food pyramid, 2000 calorie diet, all these things that have been around for years. And it's like, who do we trust to put the nutritional future, whose hands do we put that in? Do we really want to put it in the government when we don't necessarily we can't necessarily trust them? We can't necessarily have faith in them to, even if they did put an effort out to really educate kids from kindergarten to 12th grade. Like every single year we're doing something to really educate kids and really, teach them how to not just know what to eat, but maybe even teach them how to cook healthy foods and how to read labels and do all these things. Like whose hands are we putting that in? What information are we going to use? Because I think at the end of the day, it's just been shown over and over again that information is bought and paid for, and who is sponsoring that, right? We want the right information and we want to teach people as early as we can, but what we're teaching them too is even the harder part, because right now, like you said, the food pyramid, do we really want to teach kids that? I mean, it's something is better than nothing, but I just want, I want a perfect world, and I know it doesn't exist, but I don't know. I just want people to have the right information.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. Like in this regard, like who's to decide what's right and wrong? Well, we know what's healthy. Like we know this stuff at this point. Like we really do. Like, no knock to you if you're a vegan. I totally support your right to live any way you want to, but it's not healthy. I kind of have a philosophy that they're doing that to us on purpose to make us weaker, because it for sure is not healthy. You could never have survived as a vegan on this planet at any point in history until about 5 minutes ago, because humans are omnivores. Like it's just science. So, but as far as the kind of nutrients, what kind of vitamins your body needs, rotating meals around whole foods and protein, and that for sure is true. Like it's absolutely 100% true. It's just a matter of giving this information to kids and and young, or I mean, just really to anybody. I'm excited about some of this, stuff that seems to be getting launched recently about making everybody healthy again. Like that's great. Like that shouldn't be a political thing. Like I don't want to get into politics. It's not what it's about. Like that's a good example of something that's not political. Like we should all embrace that. Like we're all humans. We're all, if we all adopted these same kind of understandings about food and exercise and what we're putting in our bodies and how we're moving ourselves and all this kind of stuff, we would be such a different country. We'd be happier, so I'm actually really glad to see that. Like I feel like it's a way to it's a great issue to kind of rally everybody around, because everybody needs it.
Yeah, like you said, it shouldn't be political. I think to some degree, unfortunately, it is the way that everything kind of is.
Unfortunately.
But why? That to me, that's like another one of those, the conspiracy theories, if you will, or just kind of look deeper into why that would become politicized. And if it's politicized, it means it's going to somehow be used to divide and somehow be used to control. So I think we need to individually take control of our own health on an individual level. And that takes people like you and maybe even people like me with a podcast platform to try to help those who want help, but also just introduce those people who, if they're on that pre-contemplation state, how do you introduce the idea? How do you introduce the idea that protein is important and here's how we get it in? Or how do you introduce the idea of exercise? It doesn't have to be a 4-hour session every day to get as, skinny as you can, or, just sleep is important, or water is important, or whole foods, I think that's where we really need it the most, is figuring out how the individual, how we the people, if you will, can help we the people, everybody globally, not just in this country, but everybody helps everybody else, and not worry about the quote powers that be to take control and to be the ones that lead in that way.
Well, I think, like you said, what you're doing is great. You got a podcast, and, I'm not quiet at all. I say everything I think about everything. And it's just a matter of, like putting your voice out there. It doesn't always mean you're right. Like, that's the great part about it. Like, that's the great part about, about discussions about this kind of stuff is, it's illuminating when everybody gets to talk. So, and you know what? Like, now that I think about it, maybe I shouldn't trash veganism too much. I'm sure there are things I don't know about it. Like, seriously, I'm sure that I mean that. Like, I'm sure there are things I don't know that maybe I could know. It's not for me, but I do like offer that as far as like a coach, like writing those plans for people. Like, vegetarian more than vegan, but you know, there's just a lot to learn. There's a lot to like. There's this. Again, I was born in what 1983. And nobody talked about this stuff when I was a little kid. And I'm not like, it's not like I'm 20, but it's not like I'm 80 either. Like I'm still, like that's really not that long ago. Like, these conversations have just sort of, I feel like really started to happen within like the last 10 years, like people really starting to want to pursue healthy lifestyles. And what else I'm seeing a lot of, maybe it's just me, but seeing a lot of in my social media feeds is people stopping drinking, which is wonderful. I quit drinking 14 years ago, and it's without question the greatest thing I've ever done. And that's one of those things that if you can handle it, more power to you. I don't have anything moral against it. It's just not for me. But I do have to tell clients, this is my philosophy. You need to make your life about, being happy, right? That's what we all want. So let's say, you really love wine and you want to have, a glass or two of wine 3 or 4 nights a week. I'm not going to tell you can't do that. That's part of your happiness in this world, but we either have to make changes to your diet in other places if you want these kinds of results, or you have to manage your expectations because, alcohol does make a difference as far as your results are concerned. Doesn't mean that you won't get results at all. It just means that it changes. But there's also a lot of people that drink way too much. I think we all know at least one person that probably shouldn't. And it's good to see so many people starting to realize that maybe it's not for them. Because for a lot of people, it's not. Like, it really does wreck their lives. So it's good to see that, too. I feel like when I was growing up in the 90s and 2000s, it was party on all the time. Like, everybody was drinking as much, and doing everything they could. So that's a nice thing to see, too.
I've noticed that as well with alcohol. And I do think that this upcoming generation of kids, high school and college, I think they are drinking less, and potentially that is due to the legalization of other recreational drugs. Like
maybe so.
If marijuana is legal, like okay, I can do that, and I don't have the hangover in the morning, so I'd rather do that. I'd rather just do whatever, take a gummy or do this or do that, and not feel as bad, and know like maybe there aren't as many negative consequences. So that's a plus as well. So I think there's a lot of different kind of reasons. And I did hear this really interesting quote or I can't remember if it was a quote or if I saw it on a reel or something, but it was this guy talking about addiction, and not that everybody's like addicted to alcohol, but I do think that there's a psychological reason to drink, whether you're addicted or not. And he was talking about like, don't necessarily look, and I'm not going to get this exactly right, but don't necessarily look at like necessarily trying to get people to stop drinking is the first thing. Like, try to understand why they drink. What does that give them? And I think that maybe that's like even another bigger societal problem. Like, are people just unsatisfied with their daily lives? Do they feel like they don't have any control? Do they feel like they are living a life that they aren't happy with? Like, and then maybe that's causing more drinking. And maybe because people are taking advantage and taking control of their health now, maybe they feel like they have better lives, and that's leading to maybe less drinking because they feel better in their everyday life. They feel more confident. They feel more empowered. Like, I don't know. It's just really kind of an interesting, like you said, the last 10 years, more people taking advantage of the information that's out there as far as health. But then there's also, like you're talking about too, that sway of less people starting to drink. So I don't know if there's maybe some sort of correlation there. Are you a personal trainer who wants to scale and grow your business online? Have you been coaching online for years, yet don't know how to incorporate online into your current business model? Introducing Trainer Revenue Multiplier, the premier wealth creation system for fitness professionals that helps you earn more and work less. Visit www.trainerrevenuemultiplier.com today to schedule your free business accelerator session. If you're serious about taking your business to the next level, schedule your call today.
Maybe so. I actually, that's another thing I'm thinking about all these things that I haven't thought about that are wonderful going on in the world, which is nice. Another thing I've seen is a lot of destigmatization towards mental health, which I also think, like tying into what you're saying, I totally agree that most people that have some sort of a problematic relationship with alcohol have an underlying issue, like almost all of them. It's either, I can't do social situations without it, or like I'm not happy unless I drink, or like, yeah, if you get to the root of those issues, like that's 100% what you have to do, or you'll keep drinking, or if you stop, you'll go back or whatever. Um, but yeah, destigmatization and mental health, especially for guys, like I think has been huge about that. Like I've noticed, like even really masculine guys I know, just starting to understand more, things about just mental health in general, which is good. Because I kind of think, a lot of guys, men have emotions like women do. That's a human thing. It's not not a man or a woman thing. And I think a lot of guys don't talk about their feelings very much and traditionally have not. And I think that's really poisonous. It's poisonous for anybody. It is for women. I can't imagine it wouldn't be for men. So yeah, I think that might have a lot to do with why people are drinking less. Like there's, people are more willing to get to the root of their issues and look at themselves. And yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a good trend for humanity. So yay about that.
Right, right. It makes me wonder, like, as far as the mental health side goes, I know for me, like, even just being aware, like being more um thoughtful, I guess, of like what is going on, like what am I actually thinking and feeling, and then digging into that, like just on like a me versus me, level, can really start to be kind of like it makes you feel better. I think it makes me feel better knowing kind of why certain things and what certain things cause certain reactions, and like not necessarily like shying away from those per se, but understanding like, okay, if I'm around that, here's maybe what I'm going to feel like, or the reaction I might have.
Yes, it's called self-awareness. I really wish there were more of it in this world because there's not a lot of it. It's getting a lot. I will say that that's another thing I feel like is getting a whole lot better is people just becoming more self-aware. And I don't say that to be ugly. I say it because I used to be like that, and it took healing and it took purposeful introspection and work to not be that way. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I've healed a lot of things in my personal life. That's one reason I really like to be a coach. It's not just physical for me. It's, everybody knows that well, I hope everybody knows, but your mind and your body are inextricably connected. So, if you're lifting and eating right and all this stuff, but your mind's a mess and your spiritual landscape's a mess and your emotions are a mess, you're not healthy. And there are physical ramifications for being chronically stressed and having high cortisol levels and all of these other things. So yeah, a lot of self-care starts with self-awareness.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was talking to a psychologist here on the podcast a while back, and just kind of talking a little bit about the connection between the mental and the physical, right? And like you just mentioned, if you're constantly stressed out, or if you're constantly anxious or whatever, those high cortisol levels, and how that affects your physical health, and how diet impacts mental health and brain health in general. And there's just so many connections. I think that's one thing that we're getting a little bit better at, as far as like understanding from a research perspective, is how things are connected. And you can't just be this person who is, the gym bro, and have a perfect life because you have the perfect six pack. But you can't also, on the flip side, be like, well, I have great mental health and I'm doing all the things to check all those boxes, but I don't take care of myself physically, but I'm still good because I have great mental health. You have to have the combination of both.
Yeah, well, it's a whole body project. They're linked. They're totally. That's another thing that's linked to your health more than a lot of people realize is your mouth. Like people that skip the dentist, you really shouldn't do that. Like if you start to have a lot of oral problems, like, problems with your gums, and a lot of that just happens from neglect, like not brushing your teeth or taking care of yourself or going to the dentist or whatever, that can dramatically affect the rest of your health. And a lot of people don't know that. So go to the dentist, take your dogs to the dentist. The vet will tell you that too about your animals. Like, their teeth can mess them up bad.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that kind of that PSA there for the dentist, but I have heard quite a bit on the
True.
what is it called? The microbiome, like the mouth microbiome, and like your nose microbiome, your eyes, I think, have a microbiome. Like we're not just going to the gym anymore and like working out and eating the chicken, rice, and broccoli or doing whatever. Like there's so much science behind it. And I think that's why it's getting so fun for me is because I really love the why behind it.
Well, I'm really excited because, like I joke every time I use a really good company called Amazing Meds to do all like my peptides and hormone replacement therapy and stuff. And every time with them on the phone, I joke about, being the bionic woman because we really are like, I'm an older millennial. I'm like one of the very first ones. So we're all like 40 now. And but it's interesting. Like I read this article the other day that was really interesting. It was talking about how come in just one generation, 40-year-olds went from looking like this to looking like this. And they used a a picture of the cast of Seinfeld, like the original cast of Seinfeld, and like showed the ages of all the actors when they were on that show. The guy that played George Costanza, he was 31. He
Wow.
looks 51. Like, and like I think Woody Harrelson they said he was 21 when he was on Cheers. He looks 40. It's just, and this was one generation below us. And it's just really like, and there were, the article was going through all the hypotheses about, like, well, how this happened. And I mean, me personally, I think it's Botox, it's sunscreen, it's, we grew up knowing so much more about our skin and like how to take care of our skin.
I think smoking too.
Huh?
I think smoking too is a massive one.
Huge. Yeah. Smoking and the sun are the sun's even worse than smoking when it comes to aging you. Um, but yeah, I just think I don't know. I think we took care of ourselves in a different way, but what do I know? But yeah, like I certainly don't look like a 40-year-old did, even just, a generation ago. So it's going to be interesting with everything we know now about hormone replacement therapy and peptides and working out and nutrition and all of the things we know, like to keep yourself healthy, getting older. Like it'll be really interesting to see what we all, like my generation looks like when we're 70 and 80, like how this all ends up panning out, Hopefully, I don't really care so much about how I look. It'll just, how am I performing and feeling still?
I heard this thing about a while back about, and I don't know if it's true, but the first person to live to 150 is already, or is like the first person to live to is going to live to 150 is under 30 years old or something like that. Like has already been born or is under 30. I don't know, one of those things. But that's really exciting to me because like, what does that mean for like, hopefully that's in a healthy way. Of course, it's not just like people are prolonging their life and it's not very quality and things like that. But like, what does that look like as far as how does life itself change too? Like that's going to change the world completely if you are even forget 150, but if life expectancy goes to 120, like there's going to be a ton of like differences in the economy and jobs. Like if you probably can no longer retire anymore if you're 65, if you're living, another 60 years. So like, how does that impact the world in that way? Obviously, people are talking about like food supply and like, is there going to be a shortage in that or whatever, or just resources in general? But I think that there's with this increase in health and life expectancy, that's going to completely change the world.
It's going to change financial planning for sure. I mean, instead of having to plan for 90, 95, you're going to have to plan for a lot longer than that. So it'll definitely change that. But I mean, yeah, I don't know how it's going to change things, but like my grandmother who died when she was a couple of years ago, she was 104, I think. She was born in 1917. Can you imagine what somebody born in 1917 who lived for over 100 years, what they saw in this world? Like radio, moon landing, TV, World War II, Vietnam, how many presidents, the hippie era, computers, the internet, you saw all that. You saw the radio and you saw internet. That's wild.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're going to see. It's going to be wild. It's going to be wild for sure.
Yeah. And I think it already has gotten to that point too. Like we have, artificial intelligence and how that's changed just so many sectors, whether it be entertainment and information, education. You have people like aren't real that you can hear talking to you, or you can see them, like doing anything, or they, create, literature, create music or whatever, like how does that impact? There's just so many things that, and I look back on that generation as well, like with my grandfather who was born, I think in 22, and, just fighting in, Normandy on the beaches, and then, going through the Great Depression before that, and like coming back and living through the 50s and all the way, working. He worked, he just loved to be in that world, but working until he was like 92, very, very, little, very minimally, but just so much life experience, so much change. And there's no telling where, like you said, where the world's going to go from here. But I do think, it looks like at least human health in some degree, to some degree, is becoming kind of like a part of that future.
Yeah. I mean, people are starting to, like we said before, starting to talk about it more. And I mean, I'm really happy that people are starting to care more about their bodies. Like, we don't have to be this sick and fat and unhappy. It's the stuff in our food, it's our sedentary lifestyle, and it's just rampant ignorance about what it takes to be healthy. And that's nobody's fault. It's not your fault if you don't know something, if nobody teaches you. I guess that more applies to a child. When you're an adult, it's up to you to go seek out the information. We live, you've got the world at your, in your hand 24 hours a day with your phone. I mean, I still think that we don't remember enough how incredible that actually is. I'm aware of this as well too. I talk to people my age about this sometimes. We were the very last generation to know what this world was like without the internet. I remember I was about 14 and my friend had AOL at her house. Like, we didn't have it at my house, but she had it at her house. So I'd go over to her house and we'd go through the long dial-up noisy process of trying to get online. And really it was just email and chat rooms and, very limited things. But I remember what the world was like without the internet. We were the very last ones, I think, about up till about 1985, maybe 1990. But, if you were born anytime after that, it's a big divide between the generations too. Like, the screens have made a huge difference in how we're raised. And I can't imagine the long-term effects of raising some little kid on a screen.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if this is like thinking too deep into it, but I really kind of believe right now that in some number of years, I don't know if it's like 20 years or if it's like 50 or 100 years, but I really believe that we're going to look back like as humans and think, I cannot believe that they let people, especially children, online at a certain age. I think we're going to look back and think of it the same way we think of smoking. Like, I can't believe everyone was smoking at every minute of the day. Like, that was so bad for their health. That was so bad for like everything. I really think we're going to look back on social media and have the same, opinion. Like, we just already know so much about how negatively it has impacted, mental health as well. Obviously, if you're on your screen, it's impacting your physical health as well.
I think there's multiple things that they're going to look back on us and say, how did they ever allow that to go on? The other one's cancer, the way that we treat cancer, the way we almost kill people. I mean, with chemotherapy. Obviously, I'm not a doctor and won't claim to be one and won't claim like I have all of the knowledge in the world when it comes to stuff like that. But from what I understand, people in the medical field say that, there's got to be a better way to treat cancer than almost killing people. And I actually think that one of the best ways to prevent it is to stop it from happening in the first place. I personally believe that a lot of that's connected to this stuff in our food. And who knows what cell phones are doing to us, and these towers that are all over the place. I mean, who knows? I've said for a long time, like, we'll never get this information. I don't know if this information exists. I don't think it does, but it would be interesting to see what cancer rates were like in the 1500s versus now.
Yeah.
I don't think they kept that information anywhere. I don't think they really knew what it was, or like, I don't think that information even exists, but it would be interesting. I bet it was almost non-existent.
We just really did start to record a lot of stuff within the last 100 years. It's so unprovable or improvable, whichever word is right there. It's so hard to know like what is the cause and effect of things when you can't look back and be like, oh, well, before this, before that, like, yeah, we kind of have some idea of like before cell phones, but even to that degree, like there's a lot of information that we didn't collect back then. And it's just, it's hard to look at, it's hard. I don't know. I actually heard this on a podcast we live in a world to where we have to prove something is unhealthy instead of like using our actual common sense.
I think it got laid bare during COVID that this culture of experts that we've all been raised to listen to no matter what is a fraud. It's a facade. Okay, yes, you went to college and yes, you have a degree in X, Y, and Z. So why did you say blatantly unscientific things during a pandemic? Well, we know now because the medical boards were threatening their licenses if they didn't comply with that. I mean, that's not medicine, that's not science. So, and that was terrifying to live through, and it was really hard to see. But it was the beginning of, I think, a lot of the health stuff that's going on right now. Like everybody who's honest with themselves saw, man, I really can't trust some of these people I thought that I could trust.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I'm not trying to discount doctors by any means. Like I go to doctors, they're smart, they're educated, they're doctors for a reason. I know a lot of wonderful doctors, but I know for a fact, because I know doctors, that some of these boards and these licensing, like you have to comply. If you don't comply, you're not a doctor anymore, or not, you can't practice at least. A lot of that stuff's gotten out of control as far as, it's become a sort of a religion, like a scientism, which is not science. That's a religion. Science is constant questioning and constant testing. And yes, a lot of this does come down to common sense. So we're in a difficult period, I think, where, because you don't want to not listen to doctors, but you also, I think everybody sees at this point, you really need to make sure that you're talking to somebody who has values that align with yours, that your heart and your intuition is telling you that I believe this person has my best interest at heart. We know for a fact now that all sorts of physicians were financially incentivized to give out COVID shots. That is not science. That is not medicine. That's really scary. Yeah. So, but the good news is, this culture of experts, which really was just propped up in order to control everybody, is starting to fall apart, and that's good.
Yeah, I think it is good as well. And I think, it will be an interesting time frame to see, because with everything that falls, there's in some senses like a power vacuum, right? Like what then happens? I think we have to be careful too. This podcast is sponsored by Smoking Gun Coffee, a veteran-owned coffee company that strives to give back to those in need. Don't forget to use code TWR10 for a 10% discount at checkout. Establish something that is still good and has the power to have big changes, but we can't go in the direction of, we can't go in the direction that we were obviously in, but I don't think we can go to the other end of the extreme and be like, anybody can do anything at any point. I don't think you're saying that as well, but like, where do we find that balance? How do we get to a point to where people, like, there's still money in scientific research to be done, but it's not necessarily like funded by the companies to get a certain finding.
That goes on all the time. Like, that's kind of what I'm talking about, like with this phony expert culture. It's not that it's all phony. Like, I don't want to paint with a broad brush like that, because it's not, but a huge portion of it is it, if somebody funds a study, what do you think that study is going to end up finding? Okay. Like, that matters. And that's just one example of, yeah, we're in a precarious position right now, because you don't want to not listen to, scientists and educated people, but people, and I think they are by and large, which is good, but people really need to start getting their head, as scary and hard as it is, around the idea that there are systems of control in place that don't have your best interests at heart. Mm-hmm. You're viewed as a way to make money. I think that's why a lot of this stuff is done to our food. I know for a fact that a lot of the things that we believe about various nutrients and stuff it was all propaganda campaigns that were started in the 1950s to help people sell things. So it's not like it was some evil genius like, oh, I'm going to kill humanity and screw everybody up. No, it was really just a bunch of businessmen getting together to try to promote their interests, and it resulted in a lot of bad information. Like, I'm trying to think of a specific example, like sugar, like they did it with sugar, like, processed refined sugar is probably one of the worst things you can eat. But, people had sugar plantations or whatever, or were trying to sell this candy or whatever. I don't think they did it to be malicious. But it's had bad consequences. It's led people to have bad, wrong beliefs about food.
Mhm.
It was really just to sell things and make money. And I think a lot of the healthcare industry is like that as well. Like, on what planet are you supposed, like these advertisements you see on TV, on what planet are you, like Mr. Joe Schmo, supposed to go to your doctor and ask about this particular drug? And your doctor's supposed to know about this particular drug and whether it's right for you?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but I do think a lot of things make us sick to turn us into patients and profit machines. I do. I really do. I don't. I'm not going to claim that that's a fact because I can't prove it, but I've seen enough in my life that I believe it.
There might not be any research that says it's all connected, but hey, if the same people have been playing the same games and same tricks for the last 70 years, there's going to be a pattern there somewhere. There was this fact I saw the other day. It was like 10 companies, and it might have even been less, but I think it was like 10 companies control 70% of the global food production, and just the small amount of these like massive industry companies that control so much. But part of me also thinks that like we almost need a villain. We almost like need these big companies to, and I know this is going to sound crazy, and I don't necessarily mean it 100%, but it's like we need a villain or need these massive like institutions to have the smaller, better, more moral, more ethical companies kind of like in the background that we can count on to stay that way because they are smaller, because they are, what I'm saying? Like if I'm afraid that if those companies that we look at as like the moral and the ethical companies, if they rose to the same level of power, they would almost get corrupted as well. And then who would we look to? Then there would just be another shift of like, okay, now new companies are coming up that are looking at, human health and global health in the same ways that the current small ones are. So I don't know if I like completely believe that, but I think that there is something to this idea that there are the smaller companies out there that are ethical and moral and have these like good codes of conduct. But if they almost got too big, then somehow that would be lost.
I agree with you. It's been my experience just from what I've seen that a lot of companies, no matter what it is, whether it's a health company or like there's a lot of beauty companies that I used to love that fell prey to this. They get bought up by a bigger thing, like these five companies that own all of whatever. They eventually snap up anything that's good. I mean, let's imagine you're some guy that starts a business and you end up somebody comes to you a couple of years later and wants to buy it for $100 million. Who says no to that? You know,
Be tough.
so right. So, but once you sold it, it's theirs and they can do whatever they want. And, Johnson and Johnson and Nestle and like all of these big things that own a lot of our health and like food and, these things that you're talking about. That's how corruption and bad things happen, is when power gets centralized.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if it's this or anything else. The more things are broken up, the less, like the more choices you have and the less potential for corruption and collusion there is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's really bad when a handful of companies control our entire food supply. That's really, really bad.
Yeah.
People need to start growing their own. I mean, I posted this on social media, I think yesterday, like a story about it. Like, again, I was born in 1983. I was born in Texas. So maybe it's, a little different down here than it is in other parts of the state, or in other parts of the country. But everybody I knew when I was growing up, and I grew up in the suburbs, everybody knew how to plant things and knew how to hunt things and knew how to build things and knew how to, I mean, in 2 generations that has gone, if we ever had a major crisis, the densely populated urban centers, it's going to be a stampede and a bloodbath like nothing anybody in this country has ever seen. I don't think people understand that. Like if you rely on DoorDash and Uber and Google Maps for your existence, you are really screwed if the grid goes down.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's a lot of reliance on those systems out there. And even if you don't look at it from like the extreme end of it, like when we get our meat as a country, most of our meat is coming from other countries. Like a large percentage come from like Australia and Japan, and a lot of our stuff that we actually raise here gets shipped out to other countries because of price, competition and things like that. So like even as a country, we're so reliant. We're so like, I mean, we saw it during COVID, during the pandemic with the supply chain issues, and like we can't get this and we can't get that, and there's a shortage of this and that because, we don't do anything ourselves. And from a macro perspective, that's true, but also like you're saying, from an individual level, that's also become so true. And I'm guilty of it as well. Like I know I need to have more skills. I know I need to have more knowledge on like self-reliance and things like that. And I got, you said that more people should like grow their own food. And that's such like, to me, such an obvious idea. Like even if everybody didn't do it, if we had like general like okay, there's going to be an agricultural center that feeds these three towns, right? Like, and then the next three towns get fed by this kind of farm in a very very close location. And I know that there's like that downsides to that as well, but like I just feel like there's so much more power when you put it back into like your local community. You're giving people maybe jobs that they value again. You're giving people, pride in what they do again because you're feeding your neighbor and things like that. Like, I just think there's so much positive power to that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm all about it. I mean, one of the reasons that doesn't go on is because globally, not just in this country, they're really doing it hard in Europe, but there really is an effort to get control of the global food supply, which is terrifying because if that happens, we're all in for a level of slavery that I don't think anybody can really understand right now. But yeah, like more people need to grow their own food. They need to know how to be self-sufficient. Like it, it would really behoove everybody to start. It's scary and hard to think about, but to really start thinking about just how dependent you are on a system, and how we've just slowly kind of been corralled into that over the last century in particular. Like back in like the early 1900s and before then, like everybody lived on farms, like big family farms, and they had cattle and they grew their own stuff. And, they all had 16 kids because you need 16 kids to work on a farm. Like that's really how everybody lived. That's how everybody lived for all of human history until the 20th century rolled around. And a lot of that's because of the Industrial Revolution and all that kind of stuff. But, it would, another reason I think that, we're all struggling, with our health and our mental health and all of that is we're so divorced from nature. We used to live in the middle of nature. Like you lived on a farm and all you did was see cows and animals and work land and plant food. And, I spend an enormous amount of my time hiking and, just traveling throughout the American West because I'm so obsessed with nature. Like it's like a church for me. If you live I live, just north of Houston. And if I never got out of here, my mental health would be in the toilet. There's something about like big, wide open spaces that are just stunningly beautiful where there's not a lot of people, where you remember kind of what this is all about. I don't know. I'm really excited for us, really. I was really worried for a long time that like all of humanity was in for something really scary as far as like a lot of control and things are concerned. But a lot of people are starting to break away. And, that's my ultimate dream, is to have like a homestead out somewhere. It's either going to be in central Texas or somewhere in the mountains. I'm not sure. I love the idea of the mountains because I'm there so much, but I really don't know if I want to be there all winter, with a big piece of land. So I'm not sure yet, but yeah, that's the ultimate to me is, planting an enormous amount of my own food and just being self-sustaining, like back when people were happy. I think they were happier than us. I've read a book before about like all these tales from the Great Depression about people that were poor and starving and suffering and how they found all of this happiness and hope in their families and faith and just these things that we don't have anymore,
And it also too, like, it makes me wonder, are we going to look back in 100 or 200 or 500 years and go, well, that was a weird experiment that we did. Like, why would we gather up 5 million people into a city? Like, why would we do that? That makes no sense. Why wouldn't we just spread everybody out and everybody can do their own thing? Like, I don't know. Maybe there's too much like of a, like an establishment now that's just going to be simply impossible. And I know that there's like so many positives to the structure that we have. Like, I'm not one of those people that think that everything is wrong with our society and everything is like, like down with the establishment, because like we have so much security. Like if you look at like if you have a problem, if you break your leg, or if you have something, or you can go to a hospital, like I know we have comforts, but I also know that we've lost so much of our just like humanity along the way that we need to find, like, once again, it's just this balance that we've lost. We either go from like killing each other and like tribes to then like multi-million person cities and like European unions and all these different things. Like, where is the balance?
Yeah, I think that's the eternal struggle for humanity is balance. Like that's why every major enduring religion, that's kind of what it's all about is balance and like how to manage yourself in this crazy world, and how to live so you don't go crazy and don't screw everything up. But yeah, we live in a really interesting time. Like I know a lot about history. I love to read. I love history. And there's a lot of things that are happening right now that have definitely happened before that are very concerning. But there's a lot of things that we have no precedent for at all, mostly technology based. Like there's never been this level of technology available before. Like AI scares me. It really does. Didn't Elon Musk say that it scares him too?
Yeah. Yeah. He wants more control and more like regulation on it, which is kind of shocking for the guy that like knows all about it. Like you think that there would be a guy that'd be the richest guy in the world who would be saying, no, just let me do what I want. But he's kind of like the opposite.
He's scared of AI. If he's scared of AI, then I'm worried about it too. Because you're right, there's these deep fake thing going on now. Like, sure looks like this famous person said that, but they didn't. I know it's really crazy. So we're going to see some stuff, man. My grandmother saw a lot of stuff, and we're going to see a lot of stuff too. So, at the end of the day, though, as black pilled as that all sounds, if you're being fair, life on this planet, no matter what century, culture, whatever you're in, has always been nuts. Like this has always been kind of a crazy. This planet's always been a scary, crazy place. So, like we've been screwing things up on this ball of dirt for how many thousands of years, and we're still here. So, we always manage somehow, and we're always breaking through to some sort of new level. So I'm excited for the future of humanity. I was really concerned for us for a minute, but that's starting to lift. I think people are starting to figure it out and want to be free and healthy again. So that's good.
I think this was a great conversation, and I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, you're doing your part. You've got a podcast. You're putting voices out there into the universe, and it'll affect somebody somehow. That's great.
Well, that's the goal, and thanks for saying that. And you as well, obviously, with your coaching, you're helping people.
This is generational. Obesity and terrible health habits are often generational, but so is health. If you raise your children and teach them these things from the time they're young, those habits are there for life. So that's great.
Good stuff all around, I think. And like I said, I really appreciate you coming on. And if you want to, before we head out, if you want to share any like socials or websites or anything like that, you can.
Yeah, I am on Instagram at thighsoverthirty, and you spell out 30, so it's thighs over THIRTY. I have a YouTube channel at thighsoverthirty, and the link is also on my Instagram page. And my website is www.thighsoverthirty.com. So you can find me in any of those places, and I'd love to connect.
If you're tired of searching for a coach or trainer, somebody who knows what they're talking about and has experience, make sure you go check out the new Coach's Corner on weightroompodcast.com. You can find quality, qualified coaches to help you achieve your goals, whether that's in bodybuilding or just general fitness. Stop wasting time and start achieving your goals today. The link to the Coach's Corner is down in the description below.